So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is a map that we have seen before, albeit in a slightly different package. I think every time we've seen Austin ERY in the past, it's been with the sort of Eastern Wastes aesthetic all around it, rather than this more typical sort of Erebor kind of feeling that it's got going on with the foliage and the general climate here. But the actual map itself hasn't changed, and I wasn't expecting this. In my head, for some reason, I thought it would be Austin Athel, the Elven Ruins map, but this is different. It is fairly large as well, and this is going to be a 4v4 siege. As far as the actual layout of this map goes, it's fairly typical in the sense that you have the layers to it. Very often, though, the very outer layer is abandoned by the defenders because the sheer width that you then have to try and cover with your armies, even for 4 defenders, is very, very difficult. So very often we see the second layer and then at the final stand be the ones that the defenders try and take their stands on. And yeah, it's sort of that typical wedding cake style settlement that a few do follow the formula of, but none perhaps quite so broadly as this, shall we say. But we'll go through the attacking armies. I believe this is a lore-friendly one as well, with evil... Actually, no, it isn't. Immediately that illusion is shattered somewhat, because I think, unless it's evil on the defense... No, okay, Erebor is not, and then... Yeah, okay, so it's a bit of a mishmash. I mean, we could say that I guess the defenders are more evil. The dwarves may be more likely to change sides than some of the faithful here. But we'll see. Anyway, we have Mr. Salty here, who is going to be playing as Cardolan, who perhaps would be more comfortable in this style of map on the defence, because it's pretty ideal for crossbows to rain down upon the enemy. But having said that, it is also fairly difficult to post up on those hills and not just park yourself right in the way of crossbows, giving them a clear shot. So Cardolan should have the opportunity to use units like the Gatekeepers and presumably, yes, the Cardolan Sharpshooters to good effect. Also the Archers were, skirmishing back and forth. There's not a huge amount of cover. I mean, obviously the terrain advantage the defenders have does mean that Cardolan will have to get a lot closer in order to be effective, but stuff like the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul, a bodyguard tier archer, and then the Cardolan Archers, who are far more basic, but still in the same sort of mould, they're going to be best at trading back and forth with the enemy and making it a little bit more difficult for the defenders to really get good value off with them. Cardolan Archers as well. We've got the Greenway Footmen just in behind, standard pikes with the armour upgrade as well, just to give them that little bit more solidity, but obviously as well a nice anchor for their infantry force. But Cardolan do need to be a bit careful. This is the kind of map where you can take a lot of damage very quickly, and that is more of a problem for their morale more than their actual casualty rate, because they do have enough numbers and the armour and defensive ability to be able to withstand that. The Tharbad Tollkeeper is a good example of that, with their big shields and also their decent defensive stats, but again, that morale could prove to be an issue if they are unprepared as they march forwards. And the Cardolan Men-at-Arms as well, a nice sword and board unit, a little bit more potent when it comes to dealing damage, but still relatively basic as far as this kind of unit goes. The Tharbad Warhammers are definitely the standout Cardolan unit in melee when it comes to their bodyguard infantry. No armour upgrade here, but they don't necessarily need it, and the real main event with them, of course, is the fact that they have those big armour-piercing attacks with their Warhammers, which should be pretty good against most of the defenders as we flip through them quickly. And then a couple more units of the Cardolan Men-at-Arms as well. Moving along, you can tell what army this is from far away because of the stone giant in the background there, but this is of course going to be Ered Luin. Umad Coolmander. I do remember that name actually, it's been a while since we've seen him. Frostspears of Azagal, again the repeaters in much the same sort of way as the crossbows. Could be good on the attack just because the hills do mean that the defenders will have to kind of expose themselves to get the most out of their infantry in melee, but that does mean that enemy ranged units can be used to good effect. But yeah, not the immediate damage of crossbows, but consistent damage, very, very effective there. Durin's Warborn, a unit bodyguard tier cavalry. With a map this wide, it does make sense to bring some mounted units, and the Durin's Warborn are among some of the more resilient that the attacking armies could probably bring. We've got some Dwarven Miners as well, as close to fodder as you can get for the Dwarves, still armour-piercing though. And then we've got the Defenders of the Blue Mountains and the Guardians of the Blue Mountains, so the standard spears, which of course standard Dwarven units always tend to be pretty hardy anyways, and then the Guardians of the Blue Mountains as well, obviously good javelins to use in supporting the attack. The Stone Giant is one of those feast or famine kind of units really because of how expensive it is, but if the enemy don't have the necessary units to be able to take it down, it can be effectively invulnerable to more defensively minded units. Shock infantry can do damage to it, but even then, not quick enough if that's the only unit you have left to deal with it. Throwing projectiles are of course the best thing to deal with them, javelins in particular, because pretty much all of them are going to land on target because of how big this guy is, and all of them are going to deal good armor-piercing damage as well. But patience could be the key here for the dwarves. Stonehewers for some more armor-piercing. The Juggernauts are a fantastic unit of infantry, combining dwarven armor with the added bit of melee defense that being a dual-wielding unit gives them. Very, very strong. Looks like 2 units as well, so going into the red limit for that extra quality. Stonehewers as well. Warriors of the Blue Mountains, the standard unit of line infantry that the Blue Mountains have to work with, and another unit of the Defenders of the Blue Mountains as well. Moving on to the third attacking force we have over here, the Dwarves of Khazad. So all of the Dwarven factions are on display, just one of them being on the defence, the Traitors. Stark, going to be playing as Khazad, the 4th Legion Shield Guard without the armour upgrade, but again, it's a nice to have, but not completely mandatory for the Dwarves to be effective. Of course, Khazad's baseline values are still very, very high, and of course, in terms of sheer infantry might, they stand out even among the Dwarves. The 4th Legion Shield Guard, very strong defensively, and they could make for a good first wave in to make sure you can establish yourself. We've got a fair amount of the Orc Hunters of Khazad as well. I mean, archers, as we mentioned with Cardolan, they will have to march a little bit closer, and unlike many of the Dwarven forces, they're not necessarily the best defensively, at least in comparison to a few others, but they're still going to be able to do good damage, and it is Khazad's only sort of regular ranged support option that they can bring. They do, of course, have the Khazad Reclaimers over here, but they're far more for close range punch and have to get far closer to the action. Very effective at what they do, but they will be also one of the choices of units which the defenders will be on the lookout for because of how deadly they can be in melee as well. 3rd Legion Infantry, again, no armour upgrades, but again, not necessary really. Very strong, very good central force for Khazad. Again, regular 2nd Legion Axe Guard, so plenty of armour piercing for the attackers here, as you would expect when the dwarves are on the field. And then you of course have the Hammers of Gundabad as well, a little bit more of a focused armour piercing shock troop with that locked morale of course. Far more defensive are the Sons of the Fallen, very strong high tier unit of spears. And then over here we have both bodyguard units as well, the armour-piercing guards of Khazad and the 3 hit-point Mithril Guard. Not terribly surprising to see that, but I mean it is a quality-focused force from Khazad, which is always the temptation. We shall see. I mean it's always the test of how potent the Dwarven defensive abilities are when they do this, because they will have to march into pretty hostile terrain. Meanwhile, Revios playing as Lothlorien, Elven representation on the field here. Very different in the way that they deploy their quality from the dwarves. Of course, they're far more finesse-based. The Lorien archers, very good at dealing damage, of course, but pretty fragile, as are the Lorien bladesmen. Again, when it comes to pure melee, they're absolutely fine and very, very efficient, but you know, their ability to take damage from ranged units is in question, and it's always been the case for pretty much every Elven faction outside of Imladris that can be where they can come a cropper, especially when they're on the attack in a siege, but it's how they interact with their allies here which may very well help them in that regard. We've got the Galathrim archers as well. They've deployed some stakes, but I highly doubt that the attackers are going to wheel all the way around here. Kindred of Caliborn throwing axes. I mean, as far as a single throwing axe unit goes, we'll see if the Dragon Slayer's trackers are on the defence, but that's really the only competition the Kindred have at being the strongest throwing axe unit in the game. We have the Carascaladon's Guardians, again, arguably the best pike unit in the game, and the Galathrim Nobles with those Silverthorn arrows. Could very well be the most well-rounded unit of archers when you factor in their melee ability as well. And then Galathrim Axemen, so even more throwing axes. Plenty of punch Lothlorien have. And then we've got some more Lorien archers and the Lorien cavalry as well, which are going to be acting as outriders here. So again, an expensive army, but there's no way to really make the elves not expensive really and have a big army, especially when you consider that their baseline units are relatively fragile. So not too surprising there, but I mean not the biggest attacking force because of the amount of quality they have. The defenders, on the other hand, I'm sure will have invested into numbers a little bit more. Google Bobble playing as Angmar, for example. I mean, they do have a really strong mid-tier force. The Barrow-wights in and amongst the Witchrealm pikemen, and the Guardians of Khan Doom do represent that perhaps a little bit better than anything else. The Trolls as well, but of course they're a very solid force. Angmar may be a little bit more at home when they're on the forward march, because they can really take advantage of stuff like the Barrow-wights there, and the Blackwatch Legion. Also got the Witchrealm Blackguard in and amongst things here as well. But all of that heavy metal can also be put to very good use when it comes to clogging up choke points, which is undoubtedly what Angmar's primary goal will be here. Orkfella's a bit of cheap armour piercing as well, which against everyone except elements of the Lothlorien army will be useful. Lorien's damage dealing capabilities and melee defense will be a problem for forces such as that. The Orcs of the Misty Mountains, played by Colonel Speaks 46. Some Goblin Archers in and amongst things over here. Obviously, numbers are definitely not going to be an issue for the Misty Mountains, regardless of how you build their army. We've got Moria Spear Guard in high numbers here as well. Not terribly expensive, but definitely the more reliable of the entry-level line units that the Misty Mountains have to offer. Again, a little bit of armor piercing, but certainly not going to make the difference against the Dwarves, but it will make a difference collectively. A couple of units of White Earth Fearmongers, on the other hand, will potentially be a bit of a problem, even for some of the stronger units of Dwarves if they get dug in. But again, it's a case of where they get dug in. We've already mentioned the fact that if they choose that wrong, the defenders, the attackers do have the ranged tools to really punish them for that. And Goblin Archers will certainly not be able to trade back and forth against certainly Lothlorien's archers that effectively, with how lowly their damage is. Cave Troll Drummers to help keep the goblins pointing in the right direction, and Cave Trolls to offer a bit of a damage spike. I mean, Khazad and Lorien do, on this side of the map, have the quality to be able to deal with the most entry-level Cave Trolls here more effectively than most, but they can still be a bit of a problem, especially when you consider the damage they can do. Blackback Berserkers, the Goblin King's Guard, and the Drake Broodlings over here, both bodyguard units, the aggressive one and the defensive one. And then the Drake Broodlings, I mean, again, they're a weird kind of unit in the sense that we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. Against the Elves, they could be a real problem though, considering the Elves can't really stop high mass forces like that once they get rolling, as long as the player using them knows what they're doing. Heavy Goblin Crossbows, of course, a couple of units of them as well, so certainly not a monopoly on crossbows for Cardolan. In fact, when we get on to the traitors up here in Erebor, played by Remy Plays, I would imagine that in terms of sheer number of crossbows, that will be an area where the defenders that actually have the advantage. The Blacklocks, of course, got a unique projectile for them, and then we've got some Ironfoot crossbows as well, so pretty much what you would expect. Ironfoot pikes are a fantastic defensive tool as well. That shield is going to make life a little bit more difficult for archers in terms of wearing them down. And just as an anchor in general, as far as a basic unit of pikes goes, there is a very real case for saying these guys are the best that the game has to offer, and Erebor will often be seen falling back upon that. Erebor Legionaries, very strong unit of line infantry, very similar to stuff like the 3rd Legion that we've already seen, the Galathrim Axemen as well for Lorien, that higher end unit of line infantry that quality factions do enjoy. Sons of Durin, a couple of units of them, again armor piercing, heft there, plenty of Ironfoot warriors with the armor upgrades as well, which is good to see. It's going to give them that little bit more resilience. The Ironfoot axe throwers as well, certainly against the long range forces of Lorien and some of the archers that we've seen elsewhere as well, but they do need to be wary of the fact that there is a lot of armor piercing in melee and at range for the attackers as well. And then both variants of Dragon Slayers, the armor piercing melee variant and then the throwing axe variant, so they may go toe-to-toe with the Kindred of Caliborn here, we shall see. And then finally, we did skim over them pretty quickly, but the player who sent me this battle replay, and big thank you to him playing as Umbar, is the Flame of Arnor. Good to see him again. We've got the Corsair Blackguards, we've got the Rangers of Castamere, plenty of damage from them, of course. Rangers, the terrain advantage will really help them as well, because getting into a back and forth against the heavier archers for the attackers today is not ideal for them, but with the hill advantage they will be able to fire first, and that is a lot of damage that Rangers are capable of chucking out. Alcarondas Legion, I mean, of course, in terms of their upper end infantry units, they certainly have more in comparison to their offspring in Cardolan, or at least they share a common ancestor, although Umbar, perhaps, the flame of the Numenorian blood burns a little bit more brightly in them. But against the Dwarves, that's not necessarily cut and dry. Umbar have got very good infantry in those regards, but not necessarily on quite the same level of quality as the Dwarves. But Umbar do have maybe a little bit more in terms of variety. Corsair crossbows a little bit more of a glass cannon. The Corsair units in general give them some numbers that they can work with. And again, more crossbows for the defenders. Belagair archers, these kinds of units, especially when you can upgrade their armour this many times, can be incredibly resilient. So trading back and forth with Cardolan is certainly viable for them. Regular Corsairs are definitely fodder. They do have a little bit more about them when it comes to combating enemy infantry units in melee than other fodder class units that the game has to offer, but do bear in mind, don't expect the world of them. Alcarondas Legion as well, more Belagair archers, Corsair crossbows again, bodyguard tier units in the Naru Royal Guard and the Harbingers of Castamere, plenty of Umbar Axe Guard as well. Not surprising given the nature of the attackers stay fully upgraded as well. And then we do have a couple of units over here who I think will probably be retreated immediately. Certainly this one unit of Corsairs will be. Don't know whether they'll do the same for the Warlords. I mean, if the General is in this unit, which he's not, but they are are still very much visible. They're not hidden in these trees by any means, so we'll see. Few mounted units around, but this is certainly going to come down, I think, to which side can use their ranged units the best, because the melee slog is going to be greatly impacted by which of the two can get on top in that regard in terms of how well they can do. There's going to be a bit of a grace period though here, because this is the kind of map where the deployment zones segment the defenders pretty broadly, so I'm sure that they will be allowed to get back into defensive shape. This is going to be a long one, so it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Maybe a little bit of a slow burn to begin. It depends on how long the grace period is, I suppose. This could be a relatively long wait for me. But yeah, we shall see. We shall rejoin when the first blows are being struck. One of the lengthier deployment phases I've seen in quite a while, but also one of the more unlikely ways in which it was going to end, which was a frontal cavalry charge by the Durin's Warborn. But the Orc fellas, as much as they can be decent against cavalry once it gets into a prolonged melee engagement, they're not so good when it comes to taking a charge, and they're also pretty flimsy in that respect, but also they can hide. So I mean, the Durin's Warborn may end up getting caught behind enemy lines a little bit here, and it's not really worth losing them if all you're killing is a portion of a couple of units of Orc fellas. To be fair, they are keeping this charge going, but it's not really an aid of much. It's a bit of a shot to nothing here, but still, like I said, one of the more interesting ways in which something like this could come to an end. Ironfoot pikes moving forward means they're definitely going to want to try and get out of here now, but they're already wavering. If they'd have cycle charged in and out against these Orc fellas, they would have been able to finish them off fairly quickly, I think, but you can see here the results of even a lower end unit of Heavy Axeman having a bit of an impact on a unit of cavalry once things get bogged down. After that initial charge wore off, not quite the domineering performance that Ered Luin were hoping for there, but still, they have caused a bit of chaos and they have managed to escape into a more open part of the field now, with 20 of them still alive, albeit a little bit banged up now. More of the Ered Luin forces now moving forward, maybe in an attempt to try and take advantage of some of these scattering axemen. Another unit of the Orc fellas, however, waiting. I suppose Angmar would be the closest faction in terms of the map that they would go to war with, Ered Luin. Another charge, I mean another good charge as well, but taking bites off these units of lowly axemen, like I said, is not necessarily going to be the be-all and end-all for the attackers. It does look as though Ered Luin are the only ones moving forward with any sort of gusto at the moment, though all of the others still biding their time for now. Cardolan instead deciding to post up on the hill, which is not really going to do a great deal for them, to be honest. They are the ones that have to move forwards after all. Some damage done. It's just as one, cavalry that is taking to the fight for the moment. Again, more Orc fellas being killed off. Lance is down again, so more of them will fall. But now, with the Warlords of Umbar here, should be enough to defuse this situation. Do they have the ability to get out? No, not really. The Ironfoot pikes are now blocking the way. It is only the one unit though. Rear charge into them combined with some infantry pressure from the front might be enough to actually kill off the pikes pretty quickly. And also it's not as if the Durin's Warborn have, yes, the hidden Orc fellas. Surprised the Warlords of Umbar actually gave up on the pursuit there. The Orc fellas in the way. Now the infantry also moving forward. I think perhaps Ered Luin there did have the idea of pinning the pikes in the front and then rear charging them, but the presence of the Orc fellas has scuppered that. So by accident or by design, defenders did a good job there. More of these basic units going forward. The reinforcements for the dwarves moving a little bit closer as well, so they can be committed to the fight. One thing that is worth mentioning as well is they are defending the outer choke as well, despite the fact that, like we said in the deployment phase, the amount of space you have to cover is pretty significant. So moving forward now on Khazad. Still no real movement on the sides. It's always a little bit of a worry when the attackers aren't joined up in their thinking and when some are lagging behind the others. And the repeaters start to fire as well, the frost spears. Again, more Orc fellas bearing the brunt of that. They will make for easy prey for the Dwarven repeaters. Defenders and warriors of the Blue Mountains here on the front with some Dwarven miners. 9-foot pikes should stabilise things, especially with the numbers of the Orc fellas, and now a little bit of a hit coming in from the side, so they are going to need more of that support from the Frostspears, probably another unit of infantry or two as well. There's always the question of the Stone Giant as well. More Dwarven infantry moving forwards. It does look as though we are starting to see a little bit more now. Another front opens up, but this is not going to go too well. This is a far more prepared Dwarven front line over here from Erebor, so one unit of 3rd Legion infantry is not going to be enough in the long run. The Ironfoot pikes will have what it takes to be able to hold them at bay. Need a little bit more in terms of infantry. Again, these do look like some newer names, so I know that the Ironfoot crossbows are making this maybe a less than appetising avenue of attack. We don't really have much of a choice. So the attackers, the onus is on you to try and seize the day and move forwards. Frostspears still doing their thing. Luin's still doing pretty well also. Also crossbows wheeling around. Meanwhile, we've now seen Cardolan move forward, and actually Umbar have elected to move back rather than defend the outer layer like their allies from the front. They do have 2 choke points to try and look after. Cardolan being ceded territory, but this does mean that this outer layer will start to retreat fairly fast. So not a very long engagement out here for the defenders. Not really sure who will be happier. I mean, I suppose the defenders will be pleased that they managed to deal with that one unit of high-ticket cavalry in the Durin's Warborn, but not really a huge amount of damage dealt in terms of infantry. Indeed, far more of the defending infantry has fallen by the wayside as a result of that cavalry. Not high-ticket infantry by any means, but still, those numbers for the defenders, they do need to hold on to as many of them as they can for the closing stages. So this defence over here was actually looking pretty solid, but when one player decides to retreat, all of them need to follow suit, so they will need to leave a unit behind in the rear guard, a unit of upgraded Ironfoot warriors. Considering the damage already done to the 3rd Legion, they will actually go on to win that fight if no more reinforcements are committed forward. So any sort of extra value they can get from this last stand situation will be good for them. Dwarves obviously need a little bit of extra time when it comes to retreating. They actually have the longest path to take as well in order to get back up to the next layer. A little bit easier to manage this one as well, which is why you often see, I think every time we've seen this map in the past, there hasn't been much of a fight out here either. This is probably the most significant one we've seen. And they are leaving the Orc fellas behind to make sure that Ered Luin can't cut off any sort of Dwarven retreat. And Ironfoot pikes will be far more of a useful thing to have later on. Another unit of Orc fellas going to be doing the same for the Cardolan advance. First bit of combat they've seen actually, but almost immediately the Orc fellas rout, which was always likely to be the case. With that charge they did manage to kill off a couple of the infantry units there, an example of how a shock infantry unit does have that effect that we see cavalry have but much more starkly. But yeah, routed off very, very easily there. Warlords of Umbar, 33 of them remain, with the Ironfoot pikes retreating also. Units way out in the backfield over there, which I'm not sure why they would be hanging back at this point. May as well stack up on the first layer as you take it and really set up for a joined up attack on the second layer, because that is going to be a little bit more important as the match goes on. The defenders will be hoping that manpower starts to abandon the attackers more and more. Lothlorien moving forwards. They'll be pleased that they didn't have to engage in costly initial attack, although over here, Lothlorien Bladesmen getting hit by the Drake Broodlings. An isolated unit of infantry is not what you want to be letting the Drake Broodlings loose on, because they reel back. They don't have the most hit points, so Elven Archers will have a pretty devastating impact on them fairly quickly. Cavalry as well with a charge, so the Broodlings under control. Erebor, along with Angmar, make for a pretty potent mix of a defence on this front line. Fella's now routing, Ered Luin moving forward, but not going to be able to cut off. Well, actually, the Barrow Whites could be cut off, which could be a useful thing to deal with. The 9-foot warriors are still alive. Again, Khazad overcautious there, and still a lot of their units way too far back. But still, if they have some elites left over in the late game, that would be more by accident than by design, I think, in the grand scheme. But if that would be the case, that does give the attackers a nice final hit to try and make. Based on the way they've been playing so far, is likely to be how things shake up. The Stone Giant. Fellas turning around once again. Far and away the most active singular units that the defenders have had here. Their basic axemen from Angmar. None of them are going to be left for the second defence. So stop the Barrow Whites Legion infantry rushing forward. For warriors doing the same, I think maybe to intercept the Lothlorien bladesmen. The thing is, just nipping at their heels isn't really going to do much to the Barrow Whites because of their hit points. You need to actively stop them and surround them. They don't do the most damage, especially when they're isolated like this. Instead, electing to turn around. Will the Lothlorien bladesmen do the same? Try and sandwich the Ironfoot warriors. Just about like, well, they managed to catch one of the Lothlorien bladesmen, but now 3rd Legion, far healthier and also the stronger baseline unit in general. Now, this is the problem with these sorts of defences, is you get to post up on the hill, but it also leaves you horribly exposed to especially linear projectiles like the repeaters and any crossbows that Cardolan may want to utilise. I mean, yes, the shields will help and the Barrow Whites take a lot of killing from the front as well, but Lothlorien bladesmen still trying to do their thing, but they can't really afford to go too much further. Send forward more Barrow Whites. And the Stone Giant is bloodied, so I don't know necessarily what's been hitting him. Projectiles of some description. Ooh, we need to be very, very careful here. Throwing axes don't have the armour piercing that would make this a real problem, but a few more of those volleys and there's every chance the Stone Giant will fall pretty early into this fight. It is a very all or nothing kind of unit, to be honest. Crossbows would likely be a pretty good choice. Blacklock Engineers as well when it comes to dealing with this big boy. Barrow Whites taking a bit of extra damage, but nothing they cannot handle. Projectiles raining down now. Good position for the Ironfoot crossbows to be in. And again, maybe safeguarding this ammunition a little bit longer would be a little better. Then again, it is 3rd Legion infantry, is a good enough target. Lothlorien lingering a little bit too long over here. I mean, the last thing you want to be doing is the elves is giving a unit of lowly goblin archers the opportunity to get some good value off. That's exactly what's happening here. So they need to move forward quickly here and get some shelter. Broodlings again moving forward, again causing problems for the Galathan Axemen. A little bit of a broken advance once again from the attackers. Sort of thing which is likely to add up. Again, we've seen multiple instances of this, starting right from the beginning with the cavalry that went forward on their own. And as a result, they kind of isolated and not maybe as efficiently used as they could have been, and that's very important for the elves in particular because of their lower numbers and the quality-centric nature of them, and considering they have to advance into a very numerous goblin defence, that is the sort of thing which can add up. As we move towards the late game, Barrow White's still kind of splayed out in front of the main defence of the pipeline, although they've taken a lot of damage at the hands of those cross spears. Guardians now doing the same as well. So Ered Luin, I think, have probably been the most dynamic of the attackers so far, making good use of various kinds of units. Over here, the Stone Giant. The Barrow-wights are very unlikely to be able to do the kind of damage to bring this guy down, and just trying to chip away at as much manpower as possible. Guardians continuing to loop those javelins. Juggernauts moving forwards as well. Kind of unit indeed. Cardolan just sort of stacking up over here, but it's with no real purpose, to be honest. If anything, being over here just invites potential extra damage, which definitely has been the case so far from projectiles up on the cliff. Cardolan really ought to be attempting to make something happen over here, which, to their credit, they are. Hearthguard of Amonsul and Cardolan archers looping a few projectiles in, but a lot of these Umbar forces and the Dwarven pikes are heavily armoured and shielded. Naren Iru Royal Guard, along with the Hearthguard, are the best sort of heavy archer for this sort of thing. Dadian Royal Guard as well. Bodyguard archers that prioritise defence almost completely. So you're not going to do a huge amount of damage to them like that. And the Ruffians are out in front as well. And another good opportunity here to get some value. A downhill charge from the Warlords of Umbar into the Ruffians is only going to end in favour of one side. And more damage being done again. Because the defenders have got access to some numerous armies, two Orcish armies in particular, like the attackers can't really afford to be throwing away units like that too often. Some elven projectiles overhead, getting hits on the goblins, but the question of efficiency rears its head. Glathram down there as well. Axeman. Cave Trolls also. One unit of Lothlorien Bladesmen, this isn't going to achieve anything. Feeding kills into the goblins, and that is the last thing that is required. It's hard to attack as the elves in this sort of situation because of the natural lower numbers and lower defense in terms of some of these units that they do have in terms of the armor. But that is definitely not the way to handle things. Second unit as well, which is going to suffer the same sort of fate. Glathram Axeman. Throwing axes, very damaging. As well will be doing a good amount of damage, but again, Lothlorien cavalry charging right into the, bumping right into the front of these spears. I mean, the Goblin infantry won't like it, but the Moria spear guard will be more than happy to get a bit of extra value from something like that. Drone's still doing their thing. Meanwhile, in the front, the Blue Mountains still doing their thing. Stone Giant again. Khazad joining their Dwarven brothers on the front line. Attack the traitors that are Erebor. Did that hit? Or was that like a case of he was right in the middle so they missed? Because I feel like that would still be a kill on the Stone Giant if they hit, and he wouldn't be able to tank it. If so, that was remarkably fortunate that the Stone Giant lived. Witches, though, immediately getting targeted by some attacking projectile, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Try and force them further back. Don't allow them to have a big impact early on here. I guess it's the middle part of the battle now, the attack for the second layer. More pikes moving forward. Plenty of reinforcements close enough by. Another unit Barrow-wights as well, so they can hold on here for a decent amount of time. Away over here, looks as though Umbar, Cardolan as well, do look to be now moving across and focusing their efforts. More of a genuine infantry threat now. Time for pikes helping to anchor the El Carondas Legion in place. Cardolan archers still trying to offer some support, but again, more looped projectiles this. The heavy lifting is going to have to be done by the infantry. of Royal Guard. I think they haven't taken a single loss, actually, in spite of taking many volleys. I mean, again, the shot wasn't the best. Loose formation, one of the best defensive archers in the game. It was always going to end in that kind of way, I think. Plenty of wasted projectiles there for the attackers, you would say. Speaking of which, there are fire arrows being used in the distance over there. Plenty of javelins coursing through the sky as well. Galadhrim warriors and Keren Amroth rangers. I mean, token effort of infantry on the front line, but depends on how much damage these elven projectiles are able to do. It's not an ideal situation for them. Again, the Drake Broodling is looking to play the role of disruptor. Galadhrim Axeman. Galadhrim warriors? No, just regular Axeman. Oh no, there are some warriors. Drake Broodling should take more damage, but as long as they keep moving, they should be able to escape through these elven infantrymen. Well, they got caught there in the wrong place as well. That's where the heavy Axemen are at. Routing, they are. Again, lack of numbers on the front line. Drake Broodlings and then the Goblins following through with that. Proving to be key. The Elves, of course, have got better morale than most, but it's not unbreakable with their regular units, especially when you put them in a very disadvantageous situation like that. This line of skirmishers out of ammo, perhaps just being used as extra numbers on the front line. Just keeping that sheer numbers advantage that they do have at the moment. Again, it's less stark over here where Cardolan are concerned because of that support they can offer and the numbers they have of their infantry. Sharpshooters. Again, not the easiest shots to make. Belagire archers again, heavy archers being the target. A counter skirmish fire will suit the defenders down to the ground. This is exactly what the Belagire archers are good at, especially when they have those full upgrades of theirs. Barbad Tollkeepers being a more defensively minded unit of infantry on the front line, but they need a bit of extra quality here, Cardolan, otherwise the Alcarondas Legion, of course their Blackguards even, are not half bad in melee either. My footman could be the answer as well. A few pikes on the front line. Meanwhile over here again the Stone Giant moves forward, trying to do some real burst damage. Again, against the Barrow Whites they're more likely to be able to withstand that kind of thing a little bit longer, but also getting rid of them more quickly will definitely be on the agenda for the attackers. Guardians of Khazad also catching some strays now as well. Sons of Durin moving in, they'll be a bit better in melee, but again the Stone Giant, even against really strong units of armed piercing infantry, takes a while to bring down. It's more of a slow burn kind of situation unless you have those really high-end throwing projectiles or crossbow bolts that you can bring down fast. Time for crossbows in melee now as well. I mean, maybe a few more reinforcements are needed in terms of infantry for the attackers here. Stone Giant's doing a good job. They will need some extra infantry in order to just help support things, you would imagine. Already got a bit of a defence set up on the final plateau of Austin Airy, so the defenders at some point I imagine will want to retreat. Stone Giant really is ratcheting up the kills now, various kinds of units as well. Can the rest of the army take full advantage of that? Blackbook Engineers though, clear shot, so maybe the Stone Giant now will want to retreat. Unit of the Stone Hewers to help shore things up in terms of the amount of infantry they have on the front line anyway. Some throwing javelins as well. Looped shots, but some of them are hitting. Reinforcements still, but then two armies can attack over here for the attackers, whereas two choke points at the back, Cardolan and Lothlorien, have to make do with their own strength on its own. Lords of Umbar could get a charge here into the ruffians, but further in they go though, the more spears they are going to encounter. Cardolan, as long as they can sustain this attack, and they do actually have a bit of 29 Rangers and Cardolan sharpshooters shooting to the side of this position. Most of those projectiles being absorbed by Corsairs, which is better for Umbar, but it does also mean that this defensive position in general is exposed to that kind of fire a little bit more so than it has been up to this point. Cardolan have the ammo to take advantage of that, that would be good for them, and actually as the Witch-Round Pikemen arrive, that's an even juicier target, so Dwarves from the front and Cardolan from this side maybe having a little bit better of a time of things. Ruffians fleeing, although absorbing ammunition. Unnecessary shots being taken by Umbar there. Lothlorien, a little bit more of a put-together attack over here, but still you would suggest not in the kind of numbers that are going to be necessary for some genuinely go-forward momentum here. Amroth Rangers depleted, certainly. How much reinforcements do the elves have? Not that much. From archers, but it looks as though they're involved in a back and forth with goblin archers, which is not really a good use of their valuable time. Axemen march forwards as well, depleted, but back. The problem they have here, the elves, is that it's going to be the Cardolan general, which is the big loss. As I was saying, the big problem that Lothlorien have here is up close they would be able to do a lot of damage, but they've got enough of these more defensively minded spears, and certainly the White Eric Fearmongers, to mean that it's not necessarily going to be particularly efficient engagement here. As we go back, it means have they got a bodyguard unit on the front line? And what's the Cardolan general? What unit was he in? Was he in a unit of ruffians? If so, why on earth were they on it? Wait, okay, I thought about Tollkeepers, not Warhammers. That's already playing havoc with Cardolan's already fragile morale, but that would be a wild choice to send your general forward. And you've got, when he's in a basic unit, yeah, I don't know, I don't get that. The whole point of doing that is that you can use your elite units more effectively. Not put your general in a low tier unit and then use that low tier unit as cannon fodder anyway. Especially for Cardolan, a faction like that is more likely to be affected by a misplay of that magnitude than a few others. The Dwarves, Juggernauts again on the front line. They'll do very nicely against a lot of these units, mowing their way through the Guardians of Khazad Doom, but as if to respond, the Misty Mountains sending forward their snow trolls. Nice damage spike that, but again, 2nd Legion Axe Guard and Stonehewers, so they've got some high damage units here. Snow Trolls don't have quite the same staying power as some of the heavily armoured trolls of other factions either, so being retreated off the front line now, maybe that would be wise. Save them for a little later on. Orc Hunters moving forward. I mean, there's some Cardolan units over here as well. I'm surprised they can spare some support for their allies when they themselves are up against things a little bit, but still. Extra unit of infantry moving forward, it does double down the pressure on this front line over here. Another unit of those Witch-Round Pikemen marshalling things over here as well. Yeah, it's always hard to tell, especially in these far-flung engagements, how much damage something like crossbows are doing over the course of the piece, but obviously we're always going to be one of the key elements of the defence, but also now being bundled on by some Dwarven infantry that's managed to push through the defensive line now as well, so they might have to try and wriggle free. Cardolan Men-at-Arms, we've got the Blackwatch Legion on the march forwards as well. Kind of a strange situation for them to be in to try and plug a gap rather than be the centrepiece of a defence or try and force their way through a defensive line themselves. They can try and burrow into the attackers here, try and disrupt things a little bit. Point being forced, moved back from the line a little bit. Juggernauts, there's not many of them remaining, but they will do very nicely against the Blackwatch Legion. The Men-at-Arms as well, in close support just to give a few extra numbers. Must be asked though what Cardolan up to over here. Huge blob of units. My footmen are routing, 85 of them as well. So, I mean, fire projectiles being used in the aftermath of the general being killed off against the faction like Cardolan does make a good degree of sense. Also, any sort of friendly fire that you get as Umbar, a few of your units being locked around means that you're more likely to maintain your own morale, so it all checks out. Javelins. Backing forwards, ruffians on the march as well. Back, having been routed previously. I mean, there's not really... I mean, they're back again, these Greenway footmen, but how long are they going to last? The other unit should return at some point as well. Tharbad Warhammers at the back of the queue. This is all that Cardolan really have left of this attack now. They need to hope it keeps going enough for, I think, that frontal attack is where the attackers are putting all their eggs in one basket, really. Here's our blackguards striding forth as well. Goblin archers. Again, Lothlorien is not able to make any sort of inroads, and both units of white are fearmongers. Very, very comfortable, really, in their defence. And that's a big problem. I mean, when a faction as high quality as the Elves is struggling to make any sort of impact on a battle, it's often a bad sign for the team that they're in. It does go to show again, the Elves will always have a higher degree of difficulty when they're on the attack. Cavalry's still lurking. Mammon's all over here again. Cardolan have spread their strength around their allies, which is very noble, I suppose, but it has been to their detriment when it comes to attacking their own choke point, I think. A peculiar decision indeed. Crossbows as well, but yeah, this battle has exposed the Elven struggles when they're on the attack because of their lower numbers. You need to play things a little bit more cleverly. May have been a play as well to have the Elves be one of the two on the front here, because then they could have at least had a bit of a back and forth with the Dwarves, although, saying that, you can tell here from the green fog that the Witches have very much done their thing once more. Everyone's least favourite unit. Unless you're using them, I suppose. And they're there, ready to pop out from around the corner again. Taking the wind out of the sails, and again, this was where the attackers were doing well, but that's all been undone really by the Witchers now. Stone Giant moving forward to try and get some consolation kills. Juggernaut still very much in the thick of things here, and they didn't get hit because they were far enough forward that the shots arced over them. Still doing a very nice job as well, 28 of them dying slowly as you would expect with their armour and their melee defense. Just throwing axes. Dragon Slayer's trackers as well, trying to go after the Stone Giant, who probably doesn't have that much left in him. He's taken a few of those shots now. He has been involved in the fight for a decent amount of time. The Snow Trolls come back now that things are a little bit thinner on the ground for the attackers here. Snow Trolls. Khazad, the infantry unit that is heading things up now. Morax Guard ready to move forward should the need arise. Men at Arms. More Cardolan units over here, which still bemuses me a little bit. High Thanes, we've seen them be super effective in the past. The Second Legion Axe Guard are back, which is enough to convince the Snow Trolls to leave, so they're being conservative with their trolls here. Should pay dividends later on, should they need a damage spike for the final stand, if they even need a final stand, to be honest, because the Goblins are actually forcing the Elves completely back off the second layer. Lothlorien archers. Spears as well. Frost Spears, Galathrim Nobles. Similar sort of projectile. Still using Flaming Shot again. Over here it's not gone particularly well for the attackers. I think the way they've weighted their attack here has not been that good, to be honest. They do still have a good amount of strength from the front, but they need to start making some inroads there pretty fast, I would say, because Cardolan and Lothlorien on the two back-end routes up to the second layer are going to fall apart at some stage. Flaming arrows used on the already routing unit. Still, any extra kills means that a unit of 77 is pretty likely to return. Still the heaviest of trolls as well. Not a huge amount left in reserve, to be fair, from a defending perspective, but considering they're in the ascendancy on, I'd say, all three fronts, to be honest, maybe they don't need much in reserve. Maybe if wholesale counter-attack is the answer. Umbar Axguard moving forward. Blacklock Engineers, not sure what they were doing on the front line, but still a few Juggernauts remaining, 21 of them. Being joined by some more of their fellow Ered Luin dwarves now, Guardians of the Blue Mountains, arriving on the front line. Some 4th Legion as well. The individual quality of the dwarves and hardiness of them is definitely going to help them out here when it comes to having the appearance of a better engagement than Lorien or Cardolan have had elsewhere. Stonehewers. Defeat seems certain for them, but that's mainly down to the fact that the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin are here. The scariest unit of infantry that Erebor are capable of fielding. Projectiles from up high as well, Corsair crossbows. A good angle. Decent angle for the Orc Hunters as well, though. Able to circumvent the shield of the axe throwers as well, so they will fall away a little bit more quickly. Umbar. Their axe guard. High Thanes moving forward, hoping to use their javelins. I mean, they may be just as, if not more valuable as an infantry unit at some point, but you need to use that ammunition first. Well, they do have a straight shot as well. It's not against the Dragon Slayers, I don't think. I think it is against the Axe Throwers and the Guardians, but still. Well worth doing. Just trying to get some good kills, try and build some momentum once again. Further back, the Umbar Axe Guard. Victory seems certain. Again, another high-end Cardolan unit that's over here, taking a bit of damage by the looks of things as well. So yeah, keeping things ticking over reasonably nicely here. Elsewhere though, Lothlorien cavalry, but they're just going to bump into the back of their own units for the time being. Cave trolls moving forward. There's actually some dwarven units over here, maybe a little bit too little too late in terms of the support from them. 2nd Legion Axe Guard on the front line, as are the Half Guard of Amon Sul, but they've taken a lot of damage, and again, the White Oak Fearmongers making things pretty comfortable for the Misty Mountains here. Lathram Archers out of ammunition. And to be fair, as the Goblins do move forward, the Elves will be able to take a little bit more of an efficient engagement, but they may end up with more kills than initially it looked like they were going to, but it's still saying the Misty Mountains are pretty much a shoo-in for victory over here. Speaking of which, over yonder, Cardolan still being forced back more and more. It's like the routing and then returning from Cardolan in this situation has been real. The Stone Giant has waddled his way over here now, which is an interesting call. Away from the Witches. And, could be very, very damaging to the Umbar units that are here, albeit there is the Harbingers in there. A few swings of those swords will be more impactful on the Stone Giant than most, but not going to be the most appealing engagement anymore for Umbar this, so again a little bit of a diversifying of moving their units around here. That would appear to be having the desired effect. Slapping down there. Good hits all. Warhammer's still pretty healthy on the front line, considering they've now been there for quite a while. Snow Trolls. The biggest monster against a clutch of smaller monsters is the play, although I think he's going to try and get out there. Again, the Snow Trolls, despite the fact that they have been involved, have not really taken much damage because they've moved into an engagement and then left it reasonably fast. And this engagement has all of a sudden got a little bit more riding on it, with more resources from both sides being committed to it. Cardolan's returning units as well, but most of these units are bog standard and they will not do very well against on-Russian trolls, so I'm not sure how well this is necessarily going to go. Stone Giant moving away. Meanwhile, Trolls of Angmar were moved forward, but they're taking a lot of damage very quickly. I don't really know what from. I mean, Juggernauts are here, maybe? Throwing projectiles? It should be Hardier, the hardiest unit of Trolls on the field today, and they seem to have taken damage by far the quickest. I mean, the Hammers of Gundabad are very strong in melee against that sort of thing, but not to the point where they would do damage that fast, surely. High Thanes moving forward now. We've seen them be a real menace in melee pretty much every time. We've seen Ered Luin take to the field, Dragon Slayer's trackers in melee as well. Things all of a sudden over here, it might be looking like the defenders should be thinking about regrouping in the final layer. I mean, there's not a huge amount in reserve anymore from the Dwarves, to be sure, but all the most important stuff is they are forcing their way forward, so despite the fact things have been a little bit disjointed from the attackers, leaning a bit more on their quality. Starting to look a little bit better for them, perhaps. Sons of the Fallen moving back. So crossbows still there, making a nuisance of themselves. Speaking of, good position for the Rangers of Castamere, and while making good use of their highest damage projectiles. I say that actually, quite a lot of them getting buried into this spike of dirt. They're clearly trying to hit Cardolan and break the morale of this force now, which shouldn't take too much longer, to be honest. The Trolls are in melee. They're out for a few fire arrows hitting their mark as well. Stone Giants still there. Frost Spears getting into a position where they could get some good linear fire. Not sure that's going to be enough necessarily, though. Ooh. What happened there? Blacklock Engineers, a good volley. And he thought he was safe. He was not. And they celebrate, and rightly so as well, because that was a real speed bump for them in this battle. Defenders, but they've managed to bring the big boy down. Definitely done a good amount of damage throughout the battle, though. Khazad and Reclaimers. What's going on here? They're retreating. Where did the other units go? A lot of them fell back by the looks of things. Regrouping perhaps for the final push. It does now look as though it is going to be the final layer. Each layer of the cake we've seen in action today. What's going on here? The best of the Elven units is still left as well, but I don't really have anything else, is the problem. They're not really going to be offering much in terms of numbers to the play for the final stand, and the Goblins will most certainly be doing that, as is their MO. Probably going to get a bit of a gap in proceedings now, though. Cave Trolls did take a lot of damage in finishing off the Elven rank and file, but it was a job that needed doing. Umbar charging into the advancing Cardolan forces as Umbar retreat. And the fact that Cardolan have anything at all to commit here is pretty crazy. They're going to be taking damage all the way through from the Snow Trolls also. I mean, Warlords charging in, but they do need to be a bit careful here. I mean, charging into the Man-at-Arms is obviously going to be paying dividends, but it will not be great if they end up getting themselves skewered by the pikes. But then again, I mean, what else are you realistically going to do with this kind of unit of cavalry at this stage? Umbar on the retreat once more. He really ought to be leading the way with the pikes here rather than the out-of-ammunition Cardolan archers. That's the low-hanging fruit for the Warlords. Good way to pad their kill count out. Meanwhile, Umbar will be taking up a good defensive position here. It's going to be the attack from the front, I think, which is going to be the most significant. Khazad and Reclaimers still the only ones on the front line now. Going blow for blow with another depleted unit in the Barrow-wight, so all of the really depleted units just being sent forward in this token engagement thus far. Less depleted unit of defenders of the Blue Mountains in all fairness. Still the mechanical clank of crossbows as well, Corsair crossbowman. That's probably why they retreated as well. Dragonauts. Plenty of good units left still, like we said, but it's just whether or not this defensive position means that those good units are funneled into engagements which are less than ideal for them. Also, the defenders have still got some really good units as well. The most dangerous unit in the shape of the Witches. Blackhawks, I don't know how much ammunition the Blackhawks necessarily have left. The Goblins get back into defensive shape. Crossbows as well. I mean, to be fair, if you're the attackers here, maybe a lightning assault on the front is your best bet, because the Goblins and Umbar are still kind of sorting themselves out. But with the Dragon Slayer's trackers there, you're probably not making it through quickly enough, so maybe a foolish risk to take. At least the dregs of this unit of Barrow-wights will be finished off. Sons of the Fallen. Reclaimers, a bit of ammunition from them would definitely not go amiss in this kind of situation. Juggernauts. High Thanes as well, so yeah, really good quality units. Just trying to finish off these Barrow-wights as quickly as they can. Those trackers repositioning themselves a bit. Black Engineers again in a good position, doing tons of damage again. The High Thanes. They did it to the Stone Giant, now doing bullying Ered Luin once again. Really got to keep track of this unit of Blacklock Engineers a little bit better, I would suggest, considering the problem they have been for you thus far. One unit of Cardolan Sharpshooters. The rest of Cardolan moving over to support the Elves. What remains of the Elves? I mean, I think pretty much one unit of warriors, some difficult to use cavalry, and then their bodyguard units are all the Elves have left, so maybe numbers to put around them is what they require more than anything else. Heavy Goblin crossbows stacking up as well. Real problem. Again, getting some side-swiping fire into some high-quality Elven units is definitely what Colonel Speaks is going to be after there. Now moving forwards, Barrow White's out of the way. Blacklock Engineers in a bit of no man's land here. The Orc Hunters could catch them out a little bit, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue for them to retreat with a little bit more urgency. Erebor Legionaries, good quality unit of infantry as well. Yeah, without a little bit more quality on the front line, they will do very nicely. Khazad so far the only ones moving forward. 2 units of them as well. I mean, they must be out of ammunition, but still, you would want something a little bit extra on the front line to be having a good impact. As with most Dwarven units, they're perfectly accomplished in melee, but relatively speaking, Dragon Slayer's trackers come back as well. All the Witchers very close to the firing line there. Are they trying to go after the Juggernauts perhaps, or are they out of ammunition? You don't see anyone committing the Witchers to melee that often. Very often they die at range after use, or before they use their ammunition, or they get killed by getting engaged in melee themselves. Not really this way round usually, but still something different. A little bit more of a general advance now, so I think the final phase of the battle has gotten underway with this sort of commitment of units. The Blacklocks, I mean, with the Witches out of ammo, more emphasis is going to be placed on the crossbows to do the business. I mean, this is pretty much the perfect firing position, surely. The kind of damage they should be capable of kicking out here is substantial. Is looping overhead. Which is Legionaries also. And those Khazad Reclaimers. Few good hits on them, especially against something like the Witchround Pikeman. Going to be pretty ideal for the attackers. Is this quality going to tell? The Juggernauts have been good in this battle so far as well. Ered Luin's high tier units are really, really tough to deal with, I would say. You would say that Khazad are probably a little bit better, a little bit damaging, more damaging at the high end. Shielded as well, but still, Ered Luin to deal with halberds and that high melee defense from the Juggernauts. Cross spears moving forward.
Our men have slain the Saracen general. Now we must send his men running back to the desert.
The Ered Luin general. The Saracen general. Classic baseline medieval 2. Rearing its head there. Castamere committed to melee as well, which is a sign they're out of ammo as well, but still, at least they offer a bit of melee defense for the front line. Defenders of the Blue Mountains routing, and not enough on the front line here. Juggernauts being overrun. What happened to the... It's got murked, I think, by the Blacklock Engineers. That's the only explanation I really have, and as a result, this attack is looking a little bit thin again. Khazad a little slow on the uptake, reinforcements needed a bit more quickly, because, like I said, this engagement really is the one. It is going to be what decides the winners and losers in this fight. Khazad finally getting there. Sons of the Fallen, over 100 of them, getting involved in the fight. So crossbows, harbingers, moving back off the fight as well, being kept in reserve. Blacklock's out of ammunition, so of course their crossbows take their place on the prime real estate for this crossbow firing position. Mithril Guard wandering forwards as well. Khazad Reclaimers. Lords of Umbar are now in the backfields also, so they're going to be able to get some good charges potentially onto some of these isolated units, and the isolated units are the high ticket ones from Khazad. Lothlorien cavalry are on their way over though to act as a blocking measure by the looks of things. It's a good spot from the Elven player there, because that could have been a little bit of an awkward situation for Khazad having saved their bodyguards for this long, only to have them depleted by the Umbar Cav. I mean, to be honest, you need to be committing those units. I know the crossbows are there, but you're not making any inroads. You need that quality on the front line. You're saving them for a day that's never going to come, which is a new player trait. It's really not gone. Like, the Misty Mountains have looked very, very comfortable in this battle overall. As is often the case, like, the Misty Mountains are always going to take a lot of losses in a fight. It's part and parcel of playing as them, but they've never really been truly threatened, I don't think, by any advance, either by the elves or... looks like Cardolan were the instigators of that one, but moving downhill, maybe getting a little bit big for their boots there, counter-attacking into a fully healthy unit of Galatharan warriors. So this could be the moment where things start to get a little bit less comfortable for them. There is no attack happening on the other side because Cardolan committed all their forces to help their allies once again, which is fair play because of the state they were in, but how are they going to dig their way out of this from the attackers? Because so far I think the defenders, as we head towards the final 10k frames, look to be the ones that should be going on to win this battle. Everything's under control. They've used their support well. They've responded to any differences that the attackers have presented them with very nicely. Guards of Khazad charge in as well. Well, are they out of ammunition? It's just a case of setting up some pretty lethal crossfire.
My lord, only half our
It is
force
crossfire. I mean, they have got some of their bodyguards in now, Khazad. Like I said, they don't really have a choice. They need to try and make some sort of impact here, but... well, in the Mithril Guard, probably need to be committed forwards, or at least... to do something about the warlords though as well. Again, it's a bit of a conundrum here for the attackers at this point. I think some of the poor decisions from earlier on are probably coming back to bite them here. Speaking of poor decisions though, the goblins, though they do kill off the Elven General before theirs falls, this isn't going to end too well for the goblins though without support. Heavy goblin crossbows is not going to be enough. So to be fair, the goblins were comfortable up until the point I opened my mouth, and then immediately they decide to go on a suicidal charge into a pretty strong elven position. They have managed to kill the Elven General off. They will do a bit of extra damage. I think they've got enough credit in the bank with defenders that this isn't going to be too much of an issue for them. Spear Guard. As well. Indeed. Also crossbowman doing their thing. Guard now arriving on the front line, but Dragon Slayer's trackers still there. I mean, the Juggernauts as well in this fight, in both instances we've seen them in a choke point fight, they've done very, very well. There's only 14 of them remaining now, but yeah, they are pushing through the line with the assistance of the Khazad Reclaimers, but the only thing that awaits them there is a reasonably healthy unit of Harbingers of Castamere who can hold their own in this kind of fight, in this kind of company. To be fair though, 43 guards of Khazad, 69 Mithril Guard. I think they will need a few more point-blank shots from those Corsair Crossmen to be assured of victory, considering how things are suddenly going for the Goblins. A bit of extra damage from the Rangers as well. They've still got their bows drawn, so a few volleys from them. Corsair Crossbows, though, now being engaged by the Juggernauts, so maybe all is not lost. Our Royal Guard, though, very healthy. It's going to be close in terms of the percentages, but I do think the defenders just have too much. 100 Blacklock Engineers. For saying that, I mean, Elven units, like, they've got the very best of the Elves and the very best of Khazad, still alive and still in a position where they can affect the outcome here. 66 Kindred. Admittedly, a few less of the Galathran nobles bearing the brunt of the Blackback Berserkers, but no, maybe they can do it. Customer's Rangers, meanwhile, also fire. Well, now the only ones actually firing into the Mithril Guard. Need the crossbows to get back on station for that. Those trackers a little bit depleted. Harbingers as well. As soon as they get the attention off of the Corsair Crossbows, they can resume firing, and that would be a very big deal, actually, as we've seen. Goblin General falls. That's it for the Misty Mountains. I think that'll probably be pretty much it for the Goblins, actually. They will no longer have a part to play. Umbar going to be absolutely vital for seeing the team over the line here. Guards of Khazad, armour-piercing, more aggressive unit of infantry against the thoroughly defensive unit of Iron Royal Guard. Both multiple HP units, but Guards of Khazad should be able to crack through that Umbar plate pretty readily. Mithril Guard as well. Caliborn arriving on the top level, considering the punishment that the elves have taken throughout this battle. Could they yet be the saviours? Blacklocks, Harbingers, siphoned off this front line over here. That's a bold move, because again, I think the problem that the dwarves are going to run into here is the fact that eventually these 5 Juggernauts are going to, although to be fair, they are ripping their way through the Corsair Crossmen, as maybe you would expect. If those Corsair Crossmen come back on the way, I don't think Khazad are going to be able to maintain. Still a couple of the High Thanes as well. Not quite as domineering as we're used to seeing them, perhaps. Again, it's having Corsairs on the front line, though. Corsair Crossbows, Rangers. The Dragon Slayers and the Nairu Aru are the ones that need to be doing the business. It's a good thing these Rangers are in support as well, with that ranged pressure. Archers still with a bit of ammunition. Again, any sort of damage you can do, any sort of pressure you can apply at this point is going to be pretty key. There goes Barlin.
Now we must send his men running back to the desert.
I think both the Mithril Guard and the Guards of Khazad are locked morale anyway, so I don't think that will actually be too much of an issue, but symbolic. The final cavalry charge of the game brings down a general. Still those Juggernauts. I mean, they need something other than Corsair Crossbows to try and put them down. They're slowly dying, but like, time is almost as valuable as the kills here now for the defenders, just to try and make sure that things don't get too far ahead of themselves. I think they've managed to deplete Khazad enough. Yeah, those Rangers have done the business on the Mithril Guard, taking them along with the Dragon Slayers trackers and melee down from about 60 to below 30. Now, this could be key. What can the elves do? Balagire Archers out of ammo now. Charging forward. Still the Frost Spears as well. Extra damage on those Harbingers. Blacklock Engineers engaging with the Kindred of Erebor, and that fight will definitely go in favour of the elves without support, and I think that's what the intention is for the Harbingers. With their powers combined, can they bring down this mighty foe? Harbingers 56. I think together they'll be just fine. And running out of manpower may prove to be the Achilles heel. Rangers out of ammunition now, having done a brilliant job on that front line. Now, going to silence the dwarven guns. Back this way. Also crossbows. I don't know if they are going to be able to finish off the dwarves over here, actually. Tough to bring down in their entirety, to be sure. I think they see the elves as probably the bigger problem, though, because they could run rampant across a greater stretch of land, whereas the dwarves are still contained for the time being, as long as they kill the elves and then, with the survivors, finish off the dwarves. I think that is the thinking. And the frost spears being hounded now by the rangers. They won't be able to get away and shoot. Cardolan's still doing a good job, mind you. Surrounding these units might be the way forwards. It goes to show how strong those high tier elven units are, that the game still thinks that they're in the ascendancy there. Balagai archers, although honestly, Corsair crossbowmen fleeing, dwarves winning over there. One unit of Balagai archers to deal with the Galatharan nobles and the Galatharan warriors. The attackers might well win this, actually. Looking at this, like, they need this engagement to go their way, to be honest. They need to finish off the Kindred of Erebor pretty quickly. Unfortunately for them, that's not something that's really possible with a unit of dual-wielding bodyguards here, elves. Really, really close battle this. Really down to the fine margins. When a battle is this close as well, any decision made slightly differently could have had a snowball effect to change the outcome as well. So as much as maybe I was a bit critical of the attackers earlier on, you can't deny the fact that they've stayed competitive. In the end, that attack downhill from the goblins when they didn't need to make it, that could well prove to be the real difference maker here, because the defenders look reasonably comfortable up to that point. Counter-attacking into a more favourable terrain for Lothlorien after taking a beating for most of the battle. The elves do the business here. Balagai archers, one of the units of Umbar, doesn't have great morale, and with their general just dying, could that prove to be the moment where they rout Alpharondas Legion, 16 of them? It's better than nothing. I mean, considering the margins, that's actually a significant addition to the fight. It's been pulled off this engagement now. I mean, yeah, the Harbingers probably could see that over the line, but is that a risk you can afford to take? Rangers returning now, 70 of them. Yeah, they need to surround and destroy this unit of Kindred quickly. Otherwise, 17 Mithril Guard, 16 guards of Khazad. And the Rangers move in. Nobles managing to surround the surround, though, so the elves managing to deal with the Balagai archers just in time, really.
Our noble brothers have lost their leader.
That's got to be the Erebor general.
They may lose heart and flee.
Could be significant. Actually seems certain for the defenders still, just about, maybe, just about managed to hold things together in the face of this late resurgence. The elves not quite having the staying power, but really close there, topsy-turvy. And there's still... I mean, there's still enough of a presence that nothing is guaranteed at this point. Also, crossbows getting a surround on the Galathran warriors. I mean, again, at this point, that's the sort of thing which every little helps. Harbingers of Castamere. Still enough of the Rangers to hold them at bay for the time being. Galathran warriors being surrounded and destroyed. The dwarves still stuck on that unit of Umbar spears. And that's the... I mean, also the Witcher and Blackguard were in here also. Angmar general. So the dwarves will win here, but I don't think there'll be enough of them left to deal with what's left of the defenders over here. Again, the Dwarven bodyguards are so good that you can never really be too sure of that. Still 3 Kindred of Caliborn left as well. A bit of a slapdash effort here from the defenders to tidy things up. So crossbows across, what are they going to do? I mean, try and finish off the Galathran nobles first and foremost is probably the play, but Khazad are on the way now. Can they get over here quickly enough? I mean, the margins here are going to be literally a few soldiers. The Rangers held their own pretty well there against the Galathran nobles in what was ostensibly a 1v1. The dwarves over here, but maybe a little bit too slowly. The Blackrock Engineers and Harbingers of Castamere are going to surround the Galathran nobles now. A bit of a clumsy bump though, by the looks of things. That's a charge, but then they are exhausted, I suppose. They break and fight to the death, so the elves are gone. That leaves 11 guards of Khazad and 16 Mithril guards to take on. Probably too many units here, to be honest. Blackrock Engineers are decent, Harbingers of Castamere are straight up good. Still. Times 2 speed as they amble towards one another. There's one Son of the Fallen, which is being well, used as bait really, but he died off immediately, so it didn't really have the effect perhaps that they were hoping for. Still, the Angmar General as well, actually, which again, considering how generals are a little bit stronger than the unit that they're in, his presence alone might be enough to have an impact here. Certainly enough to, well, I was going to say, it's not anymore. Dead. Here we go. The test of dwarven quality, I suppose, to end this battle with. It's true, actually, the Blackrock Engineers as well. It's a good test, really, to see what they're up to in melee. Again, jostling for position. The dwarves aren't really going to be able to do much about being surrounded in this fight, is the problem. The wraparound going to be coming from the Blackrock Engineers. Victory seems certain, though, according to this. Yeah, the full surround. Good work from Erebor there. They can do no more, so I mean, whether they win or lose this fight, that was the right call. But yeah, the surround should make a big difference, because denying them their melee defense is going to make a huge difference. And in fact, that's enough to completely crumble the guards of Khazad almost immediately. Mithril Guard. little bit hardier, but they are going to go the same way. Some of the defenders see it over the line. Things got a little bit hairy there in the late game. A very close fight indeed. And there are many ways in which the attackers could have made an improvement or two to be able to reverse this result, you would think. But also there's one glaring thing the defenders did with that Goblin counter-attack, which meant that this fight could have been a little bit more comfortable than it ended up being for them, but in the end the result is theirs. 1% of course the difference. 37, 19, 10, 70 or so, a little under 70 perhaps, men that remain for the defenders, considering the vast armies that were arrayed at the start of this one. Not bad at all. And there we have it. Real fight to the death.
Victory is ours, but only by a sword's edge.
Indeed. Celebrating well. Umbar and a few dwarves, all that remains. As far as what got the kills, I mean, Angmar were far more of a defensive force. I mean, a lot of those kills probably came from the witches as well. The goblins did well against the elves. That's a good return against a mainly elven attack. That decision late on could have cost them, but it didn't. Erebor doing decently, and Umbar as well. Strong. Elves got a lot of kills, but that's to be expected when you're facing off against a force that big. I think that the standout player for me from the attackers was definitely Ered Luin. I think the way that units were committed and decisions were made were probably a little bit more dynamic than his allies today. But still, all in all, a good battle, a good competitive battle as well. What did the damage for Umbar? Harbingers did well late on. They were the point of difference really, because without a unit of that quality they wouldn't have been able to win the battle, so they did very well. Other units that did well, I mean, Rangers, very important in that final fight as well, both in melee and at range, so it goes to show what their utility can be in this sort of situation. Over 100 on every unit, a few breaking 200 as well. Over 400 on the cavalry, which is always key. Cavalry in a siege battle can always be a little bit of a risk, whether you're the attacker or the defender, but when you get over 400 kills with them, you can't argue. Regular Corsairs, the only units to not get over 100, but they're the fodder units for Umbar, so it doesn't really matter too much. But yeah, big thank you to the Flame of Arnor for sending this one in. Big thank you to all the players as well for being a part of this battle replay upcoming. There's a few more sieges that I got given, which I will be working my way through in the coming weeks, and of course one more faction overview to get through in the Shire. So over the course of the next month or so, that's pretty much the schedule sorted, so we'll be moving on to that now. But yeah, big thank you once again to all the players. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.